Hello everyone, this is BCO Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a quick view and debate on Eternals. We'll look at its chances of overall success and whether it will become the first real flop of the MCU. Now, I'm pretty much sure everybody watching will know what the Eternals is, but just in case there's anybody who doesn't know, Eternals is the 26th movie within the ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe. The story this time centers around a group of engineered super beings created thousands of years ago by the Celestials. Travelling around the universe, facing off against the dangerous deviants, they mostly observe planet Earth for many centuries, but finally take a more active role where the deviants emerge post the events of Thanos snapping half of the universe out of existence. Now, the Eternals is due for release theatrically worldwide on November the 2nd, and it will be a theatrically exclusive release only. So before deciding on whether Eternals will succeed or not, we just take an overall look at the MCU Phase 4 so far. Of course, in the beginning we had the 3 Disney Plus shows, WANDAVISION, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki, and for the most part they really had mixed reactions. You can check out more my in-depth coverage of all 3 shows within this channel, and I will leave the links within the description. But I think generally, whilst people found them mildly entertaining, I don't think they left a lasting impression, and nobody really talks about them currently right now. We of course look at Black Widow, which really should have been the massive big box office success post-pandemic, but of course that was really undercut by the simultaneous Disney Plus release, and I think it's ended up grossing anything from around 377 million worldwide, so a major blunder and mistake for Disney Plus in terms of that release. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was for me a sound success for a largely unknown character, grossing over 400 million worldwide so far at box office. We all know the deal with that movie. It was primarily set for a China release to really capitalise on the China box office, but was rejected by Chinese audiences. So again, Marvel didn't really exploit the massive success that they were hoping for that release, but still overall it's managed to, I think, have a sound success in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So far, Marvel aren't quite hitting the big numbers that they were used to up to 2019, but obviously they wouldn't, everything that's gone on post-pandemic. But overall, Phase 4 so far, I would say it's been very mixed in terms of the overall results, both financially and critically. So when looking at Eternals, we really have a largely unknown group of characters, both in the mainstream audiences and also, I would say, in the more hardcore fan base. Eternals aren't exactly the most famous of Marvel superheroes. It's not exactly there like the X-Men, for example. So when we look at the project itself, we're dealing with far more of a cosmic part, an extension of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's for the most part a largely standalone entry. We overall have 10 main characters within the movie, and Marvel has very much promoted this film as the first major representation in terms of the LGBTQ communities. Now, they have released 2 trailers for the film, and you can check out my in-depth coverage of those, and I will leave the links within the description. And I just quickly thought about the Eternals itself. Yes, by all means, it's certainly something different and an expansion, but I criticise more really the blandness of the characters themselves. They don't really have very much in terms of a charisma or a dynamic or a personality, and that's where I think the major problem lies when trying to promote this movie. Now, yes, it is directed by Oscar-winning director Chloe Zhao for Nomadland, but if you really think about it, Nomadland wasn't a massive box office success. It really was in keeping more with what we've seen for the Oscars, certainly for the 5, 6, 7 years now, when a lot of films that go on to win the Best Film Award aren't really ones that are seen by major mainstream audiences. So using Chloe's name to open up this project, I only think carries around the buzz so far. So when I'm thinking about it overall, will Eternals be the first big flop within the MCU? I think it possibly might be. So what constitutes as a flop then, particularly with the MCU? Well, if we look at Shang-Chi, as I mentioned before, if that's managed to gross over 400 million, and I deem that a resounding success, it certainly is, because the fact that it's the top grossing movie within US cinemas, currently standing at 221 million. So if Eternals is going to flop, then I think if it made anything less than 150 million within the US and anything less than 300 million worldwide, if it hit those overall numbers, then I would deem that necessarily a flop. Now, it does have a very expansive ensemble cast members, but really a lot of them aren't what I would call A-list prolific superstars. Yes, we know Richard Madden and Kit Harington primarily from Game of Thrones, but what have those actors done significantly since that show finished? We don't really know a lot about Gemma Chan or any other actors involved, and I'm talking here more from a general audience perspective. Yes, of course, we have Angelina Jolie, but she's not the lead actor within this role, and Angelina Jolie has really had much more of a hiatus in the last couple of years in terms of movies, a well-established reputation and reverence and love amongst fans, but she's certainly not quite the high box office draw that she was certainly in the early to mid 2000s. What perhaps will raise more alarm bells in terms of the movie are the initial reviews following the initial early screenings from last week. And when we look at the overall reactions to this movie, they've been largely very mixed. Now, one very distinguished thing that I've noticed about these films is that they're stating that it's very different to the Marvel formula. It doesn't feel like a Marvel movie. And this is somewhat, I think, of a contradiction here, because what's been one of the biggest complaints about all of the Marvel movies is that they all feel the same. They all play to a formula. They're all very predictable. So if we're dealing with Eternals that is trying to break out of that formula and is trying to do something different, trying to go against the grain, yet it's still a problem, it's still an issue. So that's something I question a bit about the overall reviews that I'm seeing throughout this film. But other reviews have cited, while the visuals are great, there's still a problem in terms of a connection with these characters. They found a lot of them to be bland and didn't really find anything special about them in terms of the overall personality. And that's something that's been a real foundation of the Marvel films, that despite how good or bad the movies are, we've always been able to engage and relate and connect to all of these characters throughout its 10 plus year lifespan. So that's been another criticism I'm seeing throughout this film so far. We could look at this from another way and say the fact that it's proved to be divisive amongst many reviewers could be actually a good thing, because there's a general perception that when critics and reviewers review these movies early, they always give these overglowing, hyperbolic reviews, and we really take that with a grain of salt, because when you release the film early or the review embargo early, it's very rare that you're going to get any negative results, because they have to promote the movie. Now, there have been certain people that have gone very hard in terms of being very critical of Marvel's Phase 4 so far. They feel that the likes of Shang-Chi and the Eternals aren't really characters that anybody was asking for. Now, I'm a bit more lenient in this case, because I think going ahead into Phase 4 and coming after Endgame, if the Marvel Cinematic Universe is to progress beyond Phase 4, Phase 5 and Phase 6, they do have to try different things. They do have to try and introduce new and different characters. And certainly I believe Shang-Chi to a point, but definitely with Eternals, they are taking a risk. We're talking about much more of these godlike characters as opposed to the more street level characters. This isn't your typical superhero narrative where they just have a certain accident happen to them, they put on a costume and then they start saving the world. So I think it's good that they should be taking risks, but at the same time they still have to make sure that these characters can be accessible in terms of personalities and connect to audiences. So it's not enough to say that this is the first MCU movie with a love story, or this is the first MCU movie with gay characters or LGBTQ representation. That's not enough. You know, you need to really delve more into the storyline, and I think so far they haven't done a great job in kind of establishing who the Eternals are and who these deviants about. When we look at the trailers itself, they really come across far more as just generic alien monsters, visually very striking, but nothing too interesting about them. And I think it might have been a major mistake in not really delving more into what the deviants are. Now, of course, I haven't seen the movie yet, right? But so far, from everything what I'm seeing so far in terms of the reviews, the reactions, the promotional material, it is looking like Eternals will definitely be one of the least successful entries within the MCU, certainly within the last 5 to 6 years. It's certainly not going to make anywhere, I believe, from 500 million plus. I don't think that's possible. Again, this is just like Shang-Chi, it's not going to get a China release either, so that's going against its favour as well. And I think also the 2 hour and 30 minute plus time may run against it as well. So if I'm going to make any predictions, and this is just going off my own particular opinion, I can probably see Eternals making maybe just over 300 million worldwide. And I certainly think if Eternals is to fail, it won't damage the MCU anyway in the long term. And I've stated this in previous videos. If we look in the next upcoming releases, we've got Spider-Man No Way Home. Now that's going to be without doubt the biggest box office grossing film of the year. And then of course next year, despite the delays within the release dates, they've got Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, they've got Thor Love and Thunder, and they've got Guardians of the Galaxy 3. All three films are going to be guaranteed cast iron big successes, and that will really regain some of the momentum within the MCU that's been lost within these phase 4 films so far. So Eternals isn't going to damage the MCU, and Eternals failure isn't going to signal the end of the MCU. The brand is just too strong and it will carry on. And if it proves to be wrong and Eternals is a breakout hit, then that will of course strengthen the MCU even further. But we will wait and see what happens when the film releases within the next week or two. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on Eternals, and whether it will indeed become the first real Divisive flop within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've already seen the movie, without spoiling it, let me know what you think about it within the comments as well. And of course, when the movie releases, I will of course provide both a non-spoiler and spoiler review of the film itself. So those are my overall thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.